Hello, this is Andreas. In this tutorial video I want you to give some quick introduction into creating fractal animations with the newest version of JWildfire, which is JWildfire 6. One of the main new features of version 6, which actually took many weeks to implement, is the automatic creation of keyframes. This feature makes it very easy to create fractal animations in a very playful way. And together with the denoising feature, which helps a lot to cut down render times, and the also new ability to render MP4 files directly inside JWildfire, you can even finish the creation of small fractal animations in about 5 minutes now. For example, animation like this, or this one, or this. Those 5 minutes include everything: designing the fractal, animating it, and rendering the animation. So let's demonstrate this. But before we start, some explanations. First, about frames and time. When we think about an animation, we can think about a sequence of frames or images which are played back in a fast way. And the longer your animation, the more frames or images you need. And this setting is represented by the FPS parameter in JWildfire, which stands for frames per second, which means you need the number of images specified by this value to generate an animation of 1 second. The default value is 25. This means you need 25 images to generate an animation of 1 second. Usually the time in JWildfire is displayed in frames and not seconds. You see this here. The current point in time is a frame number, and the maximum time is represented by a frame count. But you can of course always calculate the current time in seconds by just dividing the frame number by the FPS setting. So for example, when you are at frame 50 and have an FPS setting of 25, you are at 0.2 seconds in time. The default setting is 100 frames, and you can also change this in the prefs for new fractals. So this about frames and time. The second concept are keyframes. A keyframe is a value of a certain fractal parameter at a certain point in time. So it's basically a pair of values, a frame number, which is the point in time, and a corresponding value. And those keyframes are the parts of the animation which are controlled by you. And the parts between the keyframes are generated or interpolated by the software. This is done by using motion curves, which is the third concept, but which is not new. New is the way to create motion curves by just changing parameters. To demonstrate this, just let us look at a very simple example: rotation of the camera. This can be done in JWildfire using the roll parameter. And now we want to just create a simple linear rotation. We start with a rotation angle of 0 at the first frame and want to have a rotation angle of 70 degrees at frame 50, for example. So we just enter the first frame, set up our initial state, which is 0 degrees. Then we change the frame number, frame 50, and modify the roll angle. And you may see that the icon has changed. It is now a little curve here displayed, which means JWildfire has detected a change of a parameter of a frame which is not at the first frame, and now automatically has created a motion curve. You can see this motion curve. This is a linear one. You can also modify it. You can add new points, delete, change, etc. And you can now play the animation. In JWildfire, the default setting for playback of animation is that it starts at the current frame. This helps to adjust certain parts of your animation. So in this case, we want to change our frame number back to 1 and start playback again. Now we see the linear rotation which ends at frame 50. So now let's create a more cool example, the real example of this tutorial video. I have prepared a random flame. Was just a Julian rings flame. I have made the colors a little bit more nice and adjusted some parameters. I think this makes a nice start, but I'm also not sure how this will end, so I have not prepared this in any way. So the only one parameter I have adjusted accordingly is the frame count, because we want also to render the final animation. I thought it might be a good idea to have a little number of frames to cut down render times. So let's have a look how this flame behaves. So we can here change the linear transform to get some very nice effects. Undo this. So let's start. I think this is already a nice state, so initial state. So let's go to our final frame and change it. The flame, this looks not bad. Let's play it. It's already very nice. And we can change almost any parameter, and JWildfire will automatically create motion curves when we do this. So now I have changed the linear transform, so effectively I have changed value at this tab. We see this, I have moved this, so we see here motion curves. Again, I can here directly in this window change the curve. For example, make it some more dramatic. Let's have a look. This is cool. And I could add some crazy rotation, maybe in the middle, or some, maybe this, and back, and now move it, shake it a little bit. Zoom it. So again, to play the complete animation, I must go to frame 1. This is really crazy. I think we try this. To make it more realistic, we could add motion blur. When you start a new flame, usually the blur length is 0. I would recommend to always start with this because motion blur calculation slows down a little bit the animation, which makes it sometimes hard to see how it behaves when you play back. Also when you use the real-time playback, when this is slowed down by motion blur, sometimes it is better to turn blur length to 0. So now we add 25. Now you see it becomes unsharp. It's really nice. Okay, we want to render this. Now we set up the frame size. This is a decent setting for this tutorial. It's very small. I have chosen a very low quality already, which is 25, but because I use the optics denoiser, it will work very well. So to render a whole animation in JWildfire, you have just to press the render button as before, but now you have the possibility to also choose an animation output. For example, we name this test2 mp4, and when you do this, when you choose it as mp4, JWildfire will automatically create the whole animation and assemble an mp4 animation. So we do this. We have it runs in the background. We have enabled denoising at the anti-aliasing tab, optics denoiser. So it's actually not only rendering, it is rendering and denoising, and we will soon see the animation. So 1 minute later, this is the result. It's crazy cool and smooth, I think. And the cool thing about the whole system is that you can animate anything. For example, we could create a variation of this. First we remove this crazy camera motion. I simply disable the motion curve for zoom and the camera movement. So this then looks like this. Now I zoom in to and can animate the variation parameters. For example, gyroscope brings maybe the distance. Look, let's increase the distance. I think this is also very cool. This may be a little bit too fast. So we smooth it a little bit. Another cool feature is that you can see how the change of a keyframe inside the curve affects your fractal. So now let's see. Yeah, that's also nice. Again, add some motion blur and render it. So again, after 1 minute the rendering is done. This is the final result. I think it looks even more cool than the first variant. And yes, this is the end of the tutorial video. I hope you have liked it and I could inspire you to create your animations, and I'm looking forward to see your creations. Goodbye.